Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Paranormal. First up this is why you should never go to a cemetery during Halloween. By Girl in Need 27. I assume the first 26 are no longer in need. Buckle in, because it's a long one. I have been told that many times before, and always been let down. Just a bit of context. This happened back in 2016. I was 17 at the time and was going through a rebellious phase. I grew up in Staffordshire, England, and lived with a very strict Catholic household. My parents were the sort who believed Halloween was blasphemous. Blasphemy, blasphemy. Growing up, I never went trick-or-treating. Carved a pumpkin, dressed up. Every Halloween I would watch out the window at all the other kids with their parents in their costumes and bags of sweets. Truthfully, I hated my parents and I hated their rules, the constant judgment, and I felt trapped. That year, though, everything changed. I had just started seeing my then boyfriend James, now husband, good job, who was 18. Came from the opposite end of town. I almost said the wrong side of the tracks there. One of 4 kids with loving, supportive parents. However, he'd fallen in with the wrong crowd at college, partied too much, made bad decisions, but compared to me, he felt free. And when we got together, it felt like 2 lost souls finding each other. Okay, if you're trying to make me cry, say more stuff like that. So on to the story. One of James's friends invited us over to his Halloween party, which was roughly a 40-minute drive. Neither James or I could drive at the time, so we asked his older brother Nate if he wanted to go. He reluctantly agreed and basically said he'll go on the condition he won't be expected to wear a costume and that we would also pay for fuel. We gratefully accepted, so Halloween came and we set off for the party. James and I were dressed as the corpse bride or groom. That's too cute. And Nate a black hoodie and jeans. However, although he didn't want to dress up, he also didn't want to just be left out and did buy a scream mask. When we arrived, the party was already in full swing. Kids in all kinds of costumes, music blasting, cheap alcohol everywhere. Not only was this my first party, it was also my first taste of Halloween, and James knew this. He has mentioned previously that Halloween was his favorite holiday, and when he found out I'd never celebrated it, he swore that this year would be my first real Halloween. We drank too much, of course. Everything was hazy but exciting. At some point, a group of people decided it would be funny to head to the old cemetery down the road. James and I wanted to go, and we asked Nate to come along, but he'd met a girl at the party and said he wanted to stay, but to call him if we needed anything. The group set off, but it didn't last. One couple turned back when the girlfriend got sick, and the rest eventually bailed when they found a pub still open. They left, just James and I, too drunk and stubborn to admit we should go back. We decided we'd check out the cemetery ourselves. The walk there felt surreal. The streets were basically empty, and if not for the odd street lamp and the torches on our phones, it was pretty much pitch black down the country lanes, and it was freezing. Although due to the alcohol, this didn't really bother us. When we reached the gates, my stomach flipped. It was the kind of place you'd cross the road to avoid, even in daylight. The gates were locked, so we walked along the edge of the surrounding woodland, and managed to climb in over a broken piece of fence. We took a gloomy stroll among the gravestones, laughing and messing about. Eventually we settled under a huge tree that backed onto the woods beside the cemetery. James pulled out his phone, downloaded some fake paranormal app, and started joking about making contact with the dead. I laughed and told him to put it away. We sat there for a while talking and smoking. There was something peaceful about the silent stillness of the cemetery. We started kissing. Disrespectful? I know, but we were drunk, dumb kids at the time. Then he froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I hadn't. I thought he was messing with me. but his face was deadly serious. I was about to roll my eyes when I heard it, a faint sound almost like footsteps circling us. My stomach dropped. We both stood up, scanning the dark. That's when we saw it. A figure, a shadow, standing a few feet ahead, darker than the night around it. It wasn't moving, but it was there. Neither of us moved. After a few moments passed, I then felt it. Something brushing against my arm, like fingers grazing my skin. I screamed and grabbed James, but there was nothing there. And when we spun back around, the shadow was gone. For one terrifying moment, everything was silent, and then, right by us, came a deep, guttural growl, loud, aggressive, inhuman. We bolted, hand in hand, stumbling over graves. As I attempted to climb over the fence, the bottom of my dress got caught and ripped. I went to grab the ripped fabric off of the fence when something snatched it. James and I watched in horror as part of my dress appeared to float up, hovering in front of us, when suddenly, aggressively, and forcefully, it was slammed down to the ground. I screamed and we ran, not looking back. Like a miracle, as soon as we ran back onto the road, we saw Nate getting out of his car. He'd come looking for us after everyone else had already returned. "You both look like you've seen a ghost." James let out an awkward laugh, and with relief we piled into his car, still shaking, barely able to explain what happened. As we drove away, I started to calm down. I thought maybe it was just the alcohol, the power of suggestion. Maybe we'd imagined it. James, who was in the front seat, turned around and smiled at me at this point. Whatever it was, or what we think we saw, was enough to completely sober us up. But without warning, the car then screeched to a very sudden halt. Something had run across the road. Nate swore he'd seen something. But when we looked, there was nothing there. James and Nate got out of the car to have a look, and that's when I turned to glance out the back window and saw it. A handprint, pressed against the glass from the outside. I screamed. James and Nate pushed back into the car, and there in my boyfriend's hand was the piece of fabric that had not 5 minutes before just ripped off my dress while coming out of the cemetery. We both started to freak out and told Nate to step on it. We didn't stop until we were back in town. It seems like kind of a helpful ghost. A little eager, but still. We ended up keeping the torn fabric from my dress, and we later tried to explain to Nate what had actually happened. He didn't believe us to this day. He still believes we were trying to play a prank on him. I know it's hard to believe, so we've pretty much kept it to ourselves all these years, until recently. Cut to present day. We got married in 2019. I am no longer on speaking terms with my parents, and last year we moved down south. This morning we were going through some of our unpacked storage boxes from when we moved, and my husband found the piece of fabric from my dress that we had stored away and figured it was time to tell our story. Surprisingly, we love Halloween, and if anything, our experience made us appreciate the paranormal realm. Whether what we experienced was demonic or just some spirit angry at two stupid teenagers, one thing is for sure: never go to a cemetery during Halloween. Story number 2 is The Luxor Pyramid Hotel in Las Vegas is a Cursed Paranormal Hotbed by Sales Knights 1. 30 male, if it matters. I'm in sales and Las Vegas is a part of my territory. Although I don't live there, I spend lots of time there for work and need to keep my hotel bill under a certain amount in order for my company to reimburse me. The Luxor is cheap, has a good valet parking, and is close to my work event. Plus, I never stayed there before, probably has some dated charm to it. I thought, fuck it, why not? When I walk into the lobby, I felt a mix of uneasy and curious. The Egyptian theme is so dated, yet the architecture was so ambitious for its time, it's hard not to appreciate it. I get to my room and just start laughing. This is the worst hotel I've stayed in by far. It was built in '93, but for some reason it feels much more dated than that. I always get a room with 2 queens everywhere I stay because hotels routinely skimp on blankets, so I take the blankets from one bed and bring them to another so I'm cozy. Smart thinking. I do not bring over any pillows since I had enough, and wouldn't be able to lay down straight with 6 pillows. Anyways, I wake up early, work out in my room, shower, housekeeping knocks on my door while I'm getting ready. I had to really yell for her to hear the room was still occupied. That's kind of annoying, so I put a Do Not Disturb sign on my door handle, which stays on for the entirety of my stay. Right as I get ready, the fire alarm goes off. This is the first time this has happened at any hotel I've ever stayed at, I thought. While evacuating, security told me our elevator was shut off. But the opposite side was still functional, meaning the alarm was triggered somewhere on my side of the resort. I had to take the fire escape down from the 12th floor. I googled Luxor fire alarm, and I guess this happens a couple of times every month. I wondered if this was the case with every hotel in Vegas, but chalked it up to being so cheap, attracting a lot of riffraff. I came back to my room a few hours later to meditate and clear my head for a work event. I beeline straight for the window and check out the view. Then I look at my bed. For some reason, the pillows from the guest bed were stacked up parallel on top of each other, 3 high on my bed. Nothing was stolen, and I'm not sure if anything else was misplaced. I wouldn't have remembered the previous location of any other objects in my room, but I knew for a fact I didn't do this. Kind of gave me the creeps at first, but then I thought, security probably was looking for the cause of the fire alarm and looked in my room even though I had a Do Not Disturb sign. Then I thought, but why would something that triggers a fire alarm be under the pillows on the guest bed, and why would they stack them up so neatly on my bed? But I was there for an important work event and was trying to relax before, had better things to focus on. I dim the curtains, lay down, and take deep breaths. 20 minutes in, my manager calls me, says he needs me to cover a meeting for him. In a rush, I throw on my things and leave, not touching anything else in my room, plus leaving the curtains closed. I don't come back until after my work event. Got back to my room around 11. I open the door and my brain's alarm goes off. Something doesn't look right. The curtains were wide open. I knew I didn't leave them that way again. Nothing was stolen. This freaked me out, but I was trying to mentally justify this. I thought I just turned up the AC this morning and the windows are diagonal. Maybe the draft opened them on their own. And I could also just have ADHD'd it, opening my windows on autopilot and forgetting I did it. I had to gaslight myself to sleep that night. Told myself it was just my ADHD and that it was in fact me that opened the curtains. But when I thought of what the room looked like when I was leaving earlier, it was dim. That scared me. I had to switch my mental channel. I had to imagine myself opening the curtains and forgetting, and pictured that so many times it seemed plausible. I didn't shower that night out of fear that if something was messing with me, it might take me being naked, wet, and vulnerable as an opportunity to escalate. I prayed hard while constant bumping and tapping occurred throughout the night. Chucked up the noises to loud, unruly neighbors, but the whole time, I never saw anyone leave or enter any of the rooms around me. In the morning, I looked at the curtains. Still closed, wasn't a draft that opened them yesterday. I got on a call with my team, said I was excited to leave, because weird stuff keeps happening. They asked what I meant, and I told them everything. One of my colleagues, who was a Las Vegas local, told me that the Luxor is notorious for being haunted and cursed, and this is a well-known thing people have said about staying here. As I was leaving, I ran into a security guard outside the elevator and asked her if security goes into rooms even if they have the Do Not Disturb sign, if the fire alarm is going off, to see what the origins are. She basically said they can do that on paper, but she doesn't remember any time they have done that. I told her about the pillows, then about the curtains being open, and she wasn't giving me anything, so I straight up asked her if the place was haunted. She told me no, and that she's never heard that and no one has ever reported that to her. I thought, weird. Maybe my coworker just knows a couple of people who are bullshitters. Maybe all this stuff was in my head. I asked the front desk about security going into rooms. She said no, never. I then asked about guests reporting objects moving in their rooms when they're gone. She again said no, never. Well, they would, wouldn't they? Has never heard that. Wasn't giving an inch. I then said, all right, be straight with me. Is this place haunted? Have any other guests ever reported unexplainable things happening in their room? She said, no, never. Haven't heard that from any guests. That's terrible somebody moved your stuff around. You should file a report. I smiled and said I was all right because nothing was stolen. I then Googled, is the Luxor Hotel haunted? If nothing popped up, I would have dropped it, but boy, it was obvious that at this point, employees are trained to gaslight. Ghosts are bad for business. Not only is this a common experience among guests at the Luxor, but is one of the most common experiences among travelers. It's incredibly well known and documented to be a paranormal hotbed. I'm glad I didn't know this while I was staying there, or else I wouldn't be able to sleep. In the Google search results, the fourth result was a 3-star review about the 12th floor being haunted. I stayed on the 12th floor. Not only did I stay there, but my room was the closest to the elevator, right in the middle of the 12th floor. The most 12th floor room on the 12th floor, if you will. I guess this place has been cursed from the beginning, with lots of deaths in construction, mafia deaths buried beneath the property. Allegedly. 4 suicides between its opening in '93 and now. A couple of murders, and accidental deaths from safety hazards on some of the attractions. I heard the shape of the resort doesn't help, but I'm no expert. Never staying at that place again. Glad it's getting demolished in 2016. Good riddance. Third story today is Paranormal Experience at My Grandparents' by Darkstars99. When I was a kid, I used to live at my grandparents' house with my mom. When we eventually moved out, I would go back for an occasional sleepover. It was mostly because I missed my old home, but also because I got to sleep downstairs alone and would stay up all night on their desktop computer. These sleepovers went from when I was around 9 until 10 or 11. One of the last few nights I stayed over at my grandparents', I was doing my usual night owl routine. I stayed in the living room with the TV playing Family Guy. Behind one of the couches was the desktop computer where I was watching Markiplier while playing random flash games. Brain rot things. Both of the cats were downstairs right next to me, and my grandparents were upstairs sleeping. For context, my grandparents' house has a very long driveway leading to the garage that is parallel to the house. The back porch of the house is usually where everyone enters through. On the garage there is a motion sensor light that still worked at the time, and could detect movement through the windows where the dining room and kitchen was. As I was messing around with the computer, I suddenly heard footsteps, not regular footsteps. They were running from upstairs all the way down the stairs and into the kitchen. Then the garage motion light turned on. I've never froze up so hard in my life. I don't remember how long I just sat there waiting to hear anything else, or, God forbid, see someone come around the corner. I tried to think of any rational explanation for what I heard. The cats were with me, and they were both freaked out. My grandparents certainly weren't running any distance, but especially down the stairs that fast. The heater was on. If it was weird house sounds, why did the garage light turn on as soon as it stopped? After nearly peeing my pants and sitting at the desk for who knows how long, I had turned off the computer and lights and made my way back to my spot on the couch, all while staring at the dining room. I left Family Guy playing on the TV for some kind of comfort and noise. I don't know how I managed to sleep that night. I told my grandparents about what happened the next day. My grandma dismissed it, didn't believe me and whatnot. She was just that kind of lady. My grandpa never had any kind of opinion on anything, and only said that the garage light turned on because a leaf flew by. I've told my family, who already believed, that the house is haunted. My grandma passed away in that house years later, and my grandpa still lives there, along with his son. Not long after she passed, I had a dream about seeing her ghost in that house, where she said it was crowded and confirmed it was haunted. I don't know what or who might be haunting that house, and I'll probably never get an explanation for why I heard someone running downstairs. But I do know I'll never forget it. Story number 4 is I had a very strange experience this morning camping in my van near Mount Whitney in the Alabama hills. My mountains are rad. So, I had a bit of a strange experience in the Alabama hills this morning around 2 a.m., and I wanted to share to see if anybody has had something similar happen in the same area, or has any knowledge about my experience. I'm having a hard time processing what happened this morning. It's rather startled me, and can't seem to think of any reasonable explanation as to what happened. I was born in Bishop and raised in Mammoth, so I've been on the east side for almost 27 years. Because rent got so expensive, I decided to build out a van, and I've been living out of that for the past couple of years. I'm very comfortable being in the middle of nowhere. I love being in secluded spaces, and I prefer to camp far away from others, so I just wanted to add that context. I was driving back from SoCal last night and wanted to split the drive up and camp in the Alabama hills, so I could spend some time reading and exploring in the morning before I headed back to Mammoth for work. It was around midnight, maybe 12:30, by the time I found a good spot, and I probably fell asleep around 1 a.m. After I was asleep for a short time, I woke up slightly because I started hearing sounds of birds, like an abnormal amount of birds, as if the morning had come and I was camping by a creek with trees. But I was on the opposite side of the road from Lone Pine Creek, and the spot I got was very barren and rocky. I looked at my phone, and it was 2:30 in the morning, so I was a little confused as to why I was hearing such loud bird sounds. But I was tired, so I ignored it and tried to go back to sleep. Then I started hearing crickets, almost as if the cricket noise had replaced the bird noises, and it was very loud, and I didn't recall hearing crickets when I showed up. I barely made it through that thought process when I felt and heard something lean up against my van. Then I heard this deafening wailing and screeching whistle noise, and my van started violently shaking. Maybe a month or two ago, about 5 to 7 of my friends decided to mess with me and shake my van from outside while I was asleep. Great friends. And that felt more of a slow rocking back and forth. The shaking I experienced this morning was violent. If it was an earthquake, it was bigger than anything I felt living in California my whole life. It was incredibly intense, and I have never been so scared in my entire life. I started sobbing like a baby. I remember having this thought that I wanted to scream "stop it" and bang my hand on the window, which is normally what I do when bears have tried to break into my van. Brave. But I was paralyzed with fear. I really can't say how long it lasted, but it felt like it lasted for minutes, and I was sobbing like a child the entire time. I have had to deal with black bears all throughout my life, and I've never been scared to shoo them away when they try to break into my van. I was consumed with fear in a way I've never felt before. The shaking didn't feel natural. I genuinely do not believe a bear could have caused it to shake so aggressively. I think a bear shaking my van from one side would have felt more like a rocking back and forth, as opposed to the intensity that this felt like. I really did have this strong feeling that there was a legitimate external terror, like this evil and oppressive presence that did not originate from within me, but was this fear that filled the air and bore down. It wasn't just anxiety. It was this objective force, and the gravity of the fear was absolute. I could probably spend the whole day trying to describe the feeling, but it's quite hard to put into words. I legitimately have never cried like that in my entire life. It didn't even sound like me crying. And it was so instant. I didn't even feel it start to well up. I was pretty convinced at the time I was going to die. The shaking stopped after some time, and it was dead silent. No crickets, no birds. I can't describe to you how unsettling that silence was. I hid under my blankets like a child, I didn't move out of fear for maybe 10 minutes, but I knew I had to get as far away from there as possible. So I worked up the courage to get up, threw some clothes on, grabbed this long knife and shovel I used to dig poop holes, and got out of my van to check for tracks. I saw no bear tracks, no fresh footprints, and no fresh tire marks, though I knew I would have heard a vehicle at least driving away after I'd woken up if it was a person. So yes, I got the hell out of there. When I got service, I checked for earthquakes. But the last time, at that time, around 3 a.m., nothing had been recorded on the internet in that area. Driving down Whitney Portal and out of Lone Pine, I still felt a bit of that oppressive fear. But as soon as I started driving south on the highway, it started to leave me. Normally, I can't stand sleeping at rest stops or anywhere with a lot of people. To be honest, I'm more scared of people trying to pull something on me than I am with animals. But I cannot express the relief I felt when I got to that rest stop south of Big Pine and parked my car near some others that were sleeping there in their cars. When I got to the rest stop, I used my flashlight to check my van for new scratch marks. I already have some old scratch marks from a bear trying to break in a couple of years ago, but there were none. I double-checked again in the daylight, and I looked very thoroughly, but there are no fresh marks on my van. I really do not want to jump to conclusions, but the real reason I'm sharing this experience is because I was hoping somebody who is more familiar with Lone Pine might have some lore about the Lone Ranger Canyon area in the Alabama hills, or perhaps somebody has a similar experience. I'm having a bit of a hard time processing what happened, and it was rather traumatizing, so I'm hoping that sharing and reading what others have to say might help. It was just east of Nightmare Rock, I know, in Lone Ranger Canyon. I'm fully aware that this spot was near or on LADWP land. It was late at night, and I was planning on leaving early in the morning. I was in no position to continue driving on the highway or go further into the hills, and because of this incident, I wasn't parked there for more than 3 hours and barely slept. So I hope nobody gets into a fuss about that. I'm hoping somebody might read this. Who knows what the hell is going on out there, because that was the most unnatural shit I've ever experienced in my life so far. Thank you for listening this far. If you did, let me know if you know anything. Okay. And the fifth and final story is The Janitor, Unexplained Encounter by Outside Resolve 2146. Okay, so this is the weirdest unexplained thing that's ever happened to me. I don't know if it's paranormal, but it's definitely gone unexplained. Some background that's important to the story. This story takes place in 2012 in my elementary school that has since been torn down and rebuilt. The school at that time was built off of a really old building that had been used as a hospital in the early 1900s. The basement of the hospital is now used part as storage room and part as a special education room. I had an IEP, Individual Education Program, and my 6th grade teacher would allow me and my friends, who also had an IEP, to go down there to get work done sometimes. Anyways, now to the main story. So on this day, a close friend and another classmate and I were assigned a group project together. Our teacher said it was fine if we all wanted to go work on it in the basement to get some focus. We mainly liked to break off and work down there because we could mess around and avoid doing work, ironically enough. So, we were excited to spend the last period of the day goofing off and getting some light work done before we got to go home. We took our supplies and went to the basement, set up a desk and started chatting. We were probably down there for about 30 minutes already before we realized we should probably start to wrap up and head back to class. As we packed up to go, a man walked down the stairs that we had never seen before. He was dressed in a dark blue jumpsuit-type outfit. He looked a bit like a stereotypical janitor. He was white, around 6 feet tall, with dark grey hair. He looked pretty weathered, and his outfit looked a little dirty too. He was probably in his 50s, if I had to guess. When we saw him, we assumed he was a custodian or something based on how he was dressed, and we all smiled and said hello. Now, the details on how this conversation began are a little fuzzy, but how I remember it was we went to walk past him to leave. He asked us if we believed in ghosts. Now, my friend and I were obsessed with the paranormal at that time, so we were definitely intrigued by an adult asking us about it. So her and I said yes, while my other classmate said she wasn't sure. He then looked at us and said, "I can tell you have a good soul by your aura," and proceeded to describe each of our aura's colors and what they meant. I don't really remember the specifics of that, sorry. My good friend, who was also into the paranormal, was really chatting and engaged with this man about what he was saying. My classmate definitely seemed intrigued, but was a little more hesitant to speak. I, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel like there was something off about the situation. The guy honestly seemed a little nuts as he went on describing the auras, and went on to talk about his wife and how she is able to fly around the world using astral projection. I honestly had never heard these types of things before. We probably stood there talking to him for about 10-15 minutes before the bell rang and we realized we really needed to get back to class. We thanked him for sharing his spiritual wisdom with us and left. My friend was all excited talking about how cool that guy was. I thought it was interesting, but because of my weird feeling about it, I wanted to talk to our teacher about it because you were responsible, and that's good. So, when we got to class, we told her what happened in the basement, and what the guy told us about. Let's just say she had a logical reaction of being confused and concerned about this strange situation. She told us to go talk to the school secretary, and ask if there was any substitute janitors working today, since none of us recognized him. So, we went off to the secretary's office, and told her the same story, and asked her if she would know who the guy was. She looked shocked, and said she has no idea, and, to not freak us out, said she'd look into it. I could tell, based off her reaction, that no one with that description should have been in the school that day. Shortly after that, the school adopted a stricter check-in policy and more security, so I'm not sure if that encounter was the cause, but I'm sure it was an influence. My take always, after discussing and thinking over that situation years later, is that it definitely could have been a weird guy that broke into the school and left without anyone noticing. Or maybe it was a spirit of an old hospital worker, since the outfit we thought was a janitor outfit could have been hospital scrubs or something. I'm honestly not sure who that guy was, and why he decided to chat to 3 young girls about ghosts randomly, but it remained one of the weirdest things to have ever happened. Another thing to note, of why I'm not sure if this was paranormal or not, is that basement was really creepy, and always felt a little off. Other kids said they heard or saw things down there, but again, this could have been kids' imagination. I've had other paranormal things happen in my life, but this is the one situation that was so clear, and all 3 of us agree to what we experienced. I mean, it's a possibility if the school didn't have a very strict check-in policy. It may not have been a janitor specifically, but some other sort of maintenance worker, like a plumber, an electrician, something like that, who was called to do a job at the school. The secretary may not have had information about it, and was just wandering around looking for whatever he was there to fix. And a little weird, a grown man speaking to 3 girls in a basement, though, I must say. But, well, that's a possible rational explanation for it. And that brings us to the end of today's video, I think. Yep, that was the last story. Big thanks to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you'd like to support the channel, you can sign up for my Patreon page, linked in the description. $1 or more a month gets you early access to all the videos on Monday. There's also a link down there to my merchandise store, which is on Teespring, as well as links to my Discord server and threads and other social medias. If you do need to contact me more directly for anything, then you can do that at kingofthecities@gmail.com. Also written out down in the description. If you need a birthday shout out, or any shout out really, you have a story you want to send in for me to read, or you have business inquiries. I think that's everything for now. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves. Bye bye.